That's what I'm
Yeah,
finding. So let's move on to the direction. Your father was one that had vision, and you obviously have that because you're very creative. You've now
sure.
delved into a whole new idea, which is really not different. I mean, to strike is one thing, to not strike is the opposite. So, opposite reverses and things like that. Let's talk about this new path that you're involved with. And why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit about
It started exactly the way my dad started. My dad started when he went from doing a traditional Chinese Kenpo art and said, look, I want to progress this to my own art. And he started watching himself doing a short form one on film. And he played it on 16 millimeter film, and he was able to reverse it on that film. There wasn't very many cameras at the time that could reverse, but he had a camera that could reverse, and he saw himself doing short form one in reverse. And when he did, he noticed something, and that was for every movement there was an opposite and a reverse. And that's why in short form one, when you have the inward block and you chamber, like the first one is a right inward block, and then you chamber the left hand. Well, he made sure that it was a purposeful elbow strike. And so he realized, to make sure that there was a purpose in reverse motion as well as forward motion. And, he coined that philosophy of, there's an opposite and a reverse to everything. So after he died, I took that to light. And, I saw a lot of people going, well, now that Mr. Parker's dead, and he's had these sayings that said, if my art is the same 10 years after my passing, you haven't done my art justice. And I knew his sayings. I helped publish the books with his sayings, so I knew all. They were like tattoos in my brain. And the ones that I gravitated towards, we all do that. I think everybody uses Kenpo as a buffet line. And if they don't feel like vegetables, they don't pick the vegetables. But Kenpo's a huge buffet line, and people only pick the things that they gravitate towards. I was a minister at one point in my life, and I remember I went to this one minister, and I said something to him. He says, "Well, if you can show me in your Bible where it says that." No, he says, "If you can show me in my Bible where it says what you said, I'll convert to your religion." So I showed it to him in his Bible, and he ripped it out and he wadded up and threw it in the trash. And he goes, like I said, if you could find that scripture in my Bible, and it's different than Tempoists, they do the same thing. They'll pick the lines that my dad said that justifies their choices. Sure. And anything that deviates from that, they'll rip it out of his works. The old man wasn't himself when he wrote that. He didn't really mean that. I knew the real secret. What? Like I haven't heard it all? I've heard it all, of everything. So it's like I get the nature of the way things are. But the thing is that after he died, one of the things that I was looking at, well, what did my dad not talk about? And we talked about a lot of stuff because we worked together. We worked over 100 hours a week together. And then I was the guy who dropped him off at airports to do seminars. I was the guy who picked him up. I was closer to him than anybody was. And we were very, very intimate, very close, worked constantly on stuff. He trusted me. He always says, my son is my right hand, my wife is my left. Which foot would you like to be? And the people that talk, negative and stuff, they always cut my mom out. They cut me out of the equation and act like, because they lived in, they might have lived in Baltimore, they might have lived in New York or whatever, and they saw my dad an hour a year, that they were closer to him than we were, which, whatever. I don't need to prove who I was to my dad. I knew who I was, but he taught me about all these different variables and how to think and how to do things. And when he died, one of the things that I was noticing was I didn't quite comprehend why everything needed to be a grab, break, gouge, dislocate, chop to the throat, rupture testicles. I get all that in a war situation, but I didn't understand that as a solution. And I looked at it and I'm going, what I think would be genius is if Ed Parker created a base technique and then said, look, I want to turn my 4-year program into an 8-year program. So he invented extensions. So then it became an 8-year program. And then I was thinking, well, why don't you have an alternative technique? That way, if you're in a situation with drunk Uncle Bob, or you're with some friends that they get out of hand, or you're in a circumstance where you felt like the end result cannot be justified, doing leap of death on the person. And so, but the thing is if you don't practice it, you won't use it. People choke all the time. I was doing a book one time on Kenpo case histories, is what I called it. And it was a read book. It wasn't a study book. It was a read book. It was like I named each chapter white to black belt. And I wanted to gain the stories of all the people who had success stories at different ranking levels. But the dumbest thing in the world I did was I started with the black belts. And I never heard one story that justified the response. None of them. They were all overkill. And because they didn't go to jail, they felt they were justified in it. I didn't feel that way at all. I heard some guy, he was on a phone. He was a cameraman in Hollywood, but at night he took Kenpo, and he was on the phone. And some guy, I don't know what the circumstance was, but he was tapping on his shoulder. And this is just the way he was telling the story. He goes, yeah, this guy, he needed to use the payphone when there was payphones, but he needed to use the payphone. And he says, I need to use the payphone. The guy's, I'm on it. He says, really, buddy, I got to use the payphone. So he took his fingers like this, went over his shoulder. He poked one eye out and pulled the other eye out, rupturing it, leaving the guy permanently blinded. He didn't go to jail for it, and he felt justified in the story. Made me angry, made me sick. And I was like, wow, you take no responsibility for blinding somebody. And you feel that because you've taken badass 101, that you're justified maiming somebody for life. Where is the gray area? Does everything have to be black and white? So that's where it started my journey of, what about the gray areas? Does everything have to be black and white? And so when I was younger, I would stay at home. I didn't get to go out half the time. And when I did go out, one of the things that I did, pay attention to was movies. And the movies I looked at, even when I got older, I looked at these movies. Where is, Master Shifu? Where is Mr. Miyagi? You always see in the movies that there's some peaceful warrior that doesn't need to lay down the sledgehammer. And they have solutions, either physical or philosophical. And I marveled at them. And I saw my dad dip in and out of it, but I didn't see any of his students do that. They were always being, always bragging about whose ass they kicked, or how the person deserved it. And I was going, look, I get that there are circumstances that you can justify, but why is there no shades of gray? I didn't understand that. I never have. I've never understood the lack of shades of gray. And so what I started to do was I go, well, why don't we take my dad's Kenpo system, and if it's about like adding to the system, why don't we have alternative techniques? So the technique is still called delayed sword, but instead of it being strikes, it's manipulation. And so one of the guys that I trained under, Ron Chappelle, his focus was manipulation. He was in law enforcement. So he looked at it differently. He had his limitations based upon the legalities of being a law officer. And so he would entertain things with me, and he goes, oh, this is great. Let's talk about this. He'd share his ideas. He'd let me give him my ideas. And I started to go down this path of what I call passive Kenpo. Well, in Kenpo, there's a club. And if you're not part of the club, and the club has a general consensus, and that is, they give you the red buzzer and you're out, And as far as they're concerned, I was the heretic of Kenpo. How dare I change my dad's system? And I'm like, well, it's not really my dad's system I'm changing. I'm evolving my ideas as an alternative into this. Anyway, the word passive Kenpo didn't work, and I got ripped to shreds by people. And that's when you start realizing, okay, look, I'm dealing with a bunch of small-minded people, and I'm not small-minded in any way, shape, or form. People look at my dad as a genius, and they automatically assume his children are imbeciles. We're not. We're extremely intelligent. And the thing is that's, one of my sisters, she's got a double doctorate degree. We're not dumb children at all. We're very skilled in our profession. But the thing is that I worked for my dad for 10 years, and that was the path I was on. I worked all the way up until I was 50. And then when I was 50, I said, I gave the first 50 years to my dad. The last 50 are mine. And so that's what I'm doing now is I have developed the material that I started 33 years ago, which is alternative self-defense techniques. So when I started to do it and started to understand what I was doing, I couldn't define it under the name martial art or under the name Kenpo. If you understand what does the philosophy of martial arts, it's the philosophy of I win, you lose. And it's the science of collision. And so what I started realizing, what I was working on was the philosophy of win-win and the science of redirection. And so it was also about psychological and physical diffusion. And my dad's was, physical annihilation and mental annihilation. And it's like night and day. Whatever I worked on was not about replacing, but was about adding an alternative. And so it's just a choice. If you're in a situation where cell phone cameras are going and you're the one with the black belt, people know what you do. And people in the world who are not martial artists, they assume a martial artist knows better. No, we're never taught to know better. We're never taught alternatives. We're never taught the Miyagi stuff, ever. And so to me, it's kind of like, well, this is a good time to spend time learning it. And so every time I was asked to go teach a Kenpo seminar around the world, it was a laboratory to me. And that's all I did. I would teach the ideas that I had in alternative self-defense. And it worked 100% of the time because it's like you're dealing with people that you can't hurt anyway. In Kenpo, it's like, if you do like leap of death on somebody, you don't kill them. Your Kenpo career is over if you killed your training partner. I did leap of death on you and I killed you. You can't do it. So it's theoretical. You're only talking about what you could have done if you were a little stronger, if you're a little deeper, you did a little more penetration or whatever. I could have killed you. But the thing is that when you look at it, I'm really being attacked by people not in a life or death situation, but they're being jerks and they're trying to hurt me. They're not trying to kill me, but they're trying to hurt me. And I'm using material that leaves them feeling out of balance and off kilter. And I started looking at the science about it, and it really started opening the door to me. And I started to travel, and I had a lot of luxuries that nobody does have. Like a lot of times Kenpoists, if they're really diehard Kenpoists, all they'll take is Kenpo. Not me. I was friends with everybody. If somebody had somebody to learn from, and I get invited to seminars, and I would be one of the guest instructors, and there might be a Russian Systema guy that's teaching and a Kali guy that's teaching. Well, I noticed that no matter who they were, nobody would take each other's seminars. And the way I looked at it was, woohoo, free. I get to take all these lessons for free. So I would take everybody's class, whether it were Systema, whether it were Kali, whether it were Jiu-Jitsu. It didn't matter to me. It was like, wow, free lessons. And, they looked at it as an honor to teach Ed Parker's son. And I'm like, no, it's great because then I didn't have to pay for it. But I will honor you by learning it, and I will honor you by practicing it, and I will give you credit for it. And I did a lot of cross training, and I did a lot of understanding, and I got so much knowledge. I felt like I was the Forrest Gump of martial arts. Everywhere I went, I got a lesson from this guy or a lesson from that guy. And I liked it too, because I learned how to show respect to all the arts. When people like from the Kaju Kenpo community would die, I'd be the only Kenpoist at the funeral. The only one, because Kenpoists will go, well, we only support our own association. They won't support other associations that might have died. It's like a cliquish group. They only stick to their own. And to me, it's like, well, set a different example. My dad showed me the example of going to everybody's funeral, supporting everybody's group, learning everything. My dad, he showed me, you know, where he learned, how he learned, who he learned from, kung fu stylists, you name it. He said, I either learned what to do or what not to do. And so I did the same. And I had tens of thousands of trainings and hours. And I got all this knowledge. And what happened is, after 20 years of being on the road, I compiled this material, and I had a tremendous amount of material. And I go, well, wait a minute. If I can't define this as martial arts, then what is it? And I looked it up, and I looked everywhere, and I went researching for months. And I realized it was just a science that people forgot to discover. I didn't invent anything. You can't invent anything nowadays. You can only discover it. And to me, I just discovered a forgotten science. And the way I look at it, it's like a cruise ship, and everybody's on the starboard side. And this cruise ship is called the USS Self-Defense. And all the brilliant minds and all the brilliant talent are on the starboard side of the ship. But nobody's on the port side, just me. And I'm like, hey, guys, there's this really cool science over here. And if you just, looked at it and put your mind and your skill set over here, you could balance out the ship. That's literally how I thought. It's not about replacing anything. It's about learning both sides of the coin. One is a win-win, one is a win-lose. And to me, I had so much fun discovering this, because I felt like, well, there's nobody to tell me I'm wrong, because there's nobody there. There's nobody to tell me that I don't belong there, because there's nobody there. And I went there, and then I go, well, wait a minute. Well, what do I call this? And I had a student by the name of Frank Soto, and he's out of Mexico. Well, he was in Mexico City at the time. I think he's in Hermosillo, Mexico now. Great guy, love him dearly. He was one of Larry Tatum's students. And we became really good friends, and he became a student of mine. And then I never liked the you're my student, type of thing. I always felt like, we're on the mat, show me what you know. I felt like I was just always in a state of wonderment and discovery. I just wanted to learn. I liked being the permanent student. If other people needed to sit on their throne, that's great. I could care less. I was given a throne when my dad died. I didn't ever took it. I didn't care. I'd rather be the permanent student. And so I started to work with Frank, and I was marveled by him. And he came up with this name called Kinetica. And I said, wow, that's a great name. Then he changed it to something else. He called it Kinetic Dragon. He kept evolving it. And then he left the name Kinetica alone. And I go, wow, can I use it? I think it's a great name, because being an artist, I like kinetic art. And people should look that up in the dictionary sometime, kinetic art. And I just thought it was really cool. But then when I started to call my art that, people go, what's Kinetica? And I said, well, it's not a martial art. Well, what is it? Well, it's not a martial art. And so I'm going, well, I better call it something. And I cannot call it Kinetica, because there's no, people are going to say, what is Kinetica? And I can only tell them what it wasn't. So then I started thinking about it, and I looked up the definition for martial arts. And it started off as the arts of Mars. And Mars was the Roman god of war. And he was a real person, so he was a deified human being. And he loved blood, loved killing, loved the arts of killing. And that's who martial arts was named after. And so I'm going, what I need to do is find out who the Roman god of peace is. And that's how I should name this, just the opposite. And so, I need a 3-letter god that represents peace. And I come to find out it's a female, and her name was Pax. And so I'm going, Pax? Wait, Paxtial. Take off MAR, put TIL on the back. Paxtial. Yeah. So I looked it up, and I was so thrilled, because the pharmaceutical companies have stolen every single variation on Pax but Paxtial. So it's like, woohoo, I found me a new word, and nobody else got it. And so that's where it came from.
Where do we find this? We're going to get to the end right here, because we've been going at it for a bit, and I want to drive people to your website so they can find out more about this. They can make inquiries. Hopefully there'll be a criteria that they can look at, and maybe even seminars requesting you, because you're launching this now, correct? Or you've
Yeah,
just launched it?
we're 2 months into it, and we're an online course because of the lockdowns and stuff like that. And the way we're doing it, it's a 3-year course, and we started teaching instructors first, and the only people that are allowed in are martial arts instructors, because martial arts is never to be taken the place of. If you're in a situation and Paxtial Arts has gone to an extreme level, then you back with martial arts.
Right.
But to me, it fits between this. You got verbal judo, you have Paxtial Arts, you have martial arts, and then you have the combat arts. And there's 4 levels, and all it is just what goes between verbal judo and, you know, the aggressive stuff that we do in martial arts. So it's not a replacement or anything, but our website is Paxtial Arts, PAXTIALARTS.com. And it's very thorough. Go to the website, read the articles. There's an article, and it's written by my wife. It's called Ed Parker's Quest for Peace. It's a good read. She's a great writer. Read that, and it'll give you a really good understanding of what I am, what I'm about. There's another article on there called Martial Influence and Bias. And it just allows people to understand how I look at things, and the difference between martial and Paxtial, and where we're going with it. But our response is global. We have a tremendous amount of people who are on board. They're totally buying into this. They're totally, it's created a life of itself. And we have 144 lessons. We're tonight we will post our 4th lesson online tonight. And people are absolutely loving it. You learn the Paxtial Arts from the inside out. Martial arts, you learn from the outside in. So it's all about getting your mind right. This is kind of like a modern day monk program. You know, we have the
Do I have to shave my head?
no, it's modern day.
Hey.